Welcome to the England Rugby Pod. Thanks for downloading episode 59. This week, we take a look at the man, the myth, the legend that is Eddie Jones. You're listening to the England Rugby Pod, the rugby podcast that believes England will win the World Cup in 2019. Hey guys, welcome back. It is possibly the one we've all been waiting for. It's the big Eddie Jones episode following a successful Autumn International series. 3-0 obviously to England. I'm joined of course by Dan. Hi mate.
Hi Andy, you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm quite looking forward to this one actually. I've got a feeling I say that every single week. But that's because I am looking forward to every single one, every single week.
I love the optimism. It's been quite an interesting one. This weekend was weirdly depressing. Not having Wales obviously had South Africa, but just not having that rugby on, you just kind of you almost feel a bit lost. Yeah. So it was quite nice. I've quite enjoyed looking into this sort of Eddie Jones side and looking into man a bit more. I haven't necessarily looked into it from a traditional statistical perspective, but read quite a few articles which came up with some things that were fairly surprising at points. Not necessarily surprising from a perspective of sort of who the man is. I think it's more surprising from the extremes he goes to. I didn't necessarily realise he was quite so, quite so fierce in certain circumstances.
Right, well, I guess we better crack on and find out what you're talking about because let's
do it.
Sounds interesting. So I thought just as a quick, some people will know a few bits. Others will not know very much about him. So I've done a little bit of looking into his sort of past. So a quick kind of intro to the man. Born in 1960, January 30th, in Tasmania. Japanese-American mother and an Aussie father. He was a player before he was a coach. Obviously, he's renowned as a coach, but he did play a bit of rugby. He obviously played back when he was at school. Then he played for Randwick and New South Wales, which is where he kind of found his position of hooker. He managed to play against the British Lions for New South Wales Bees in 1989. And he actually had 3 appearances for Leicester in what would have been, I guess, the first division then, 91-92. Would that been first division?
I can't remember exactly how the league was broken up, but certainly it would have been top tier.
He retired after that season to follow his passion at the time to be a teacher and school principal.
It was quite sort of a playing career. One of the things. Sorry, I was just jumping in with some of the sort of Randwick stuff. One of the articles I read, and I kind of get where they're coming from, but saying sort of unremarkable playing career. And yeah, I guess so with regards to he didn't get any caps for Australia, but he still played good level rugby. The Randwick team he played in included the Ella brothers, obviously Aussie legends, David Campese, Simon Poydevin, and also sort of well publicised was Michael Checker.
Yeah.
Who also played in that team.
The rivalry, well, I guess rivalry would be the wrong word because they were teammates back then.
Yeah, I find it because their rivalry now seems to be quite fierce. I wonder how much of that, and something I think I've realised sort of reading more, you can't really trust what's been said to the press
they're
through Eddie.
Playing it up a little bit because they're mates.
Yeah, I think so. So one of the things I was reading about is him and Checker actually got on really well. Back then, obviously, sort of the sledging, but both of them actually got a bit of racist sort of sledging. Eddie from his sort of Japanese-American mother's background and Checker from his sort of Lebanese roots. And he said, I don't think they were saying it was, horrendous, but it's something that helped them bond. And one of the reasons they did actually get on so well. So, there was a real point of saying how well they get on. So I do wonder how much of this current rivalry is sort of for the press side.
I quite like the idea that they're actually secretly best mates, but they just love to make out that they hate each other when it comes to heads up rugby. That's I quite like that. it makes you feel good about the guy that's in charge, because you're like, he's not too serious, which is kind of how I think he comes across.
Yeah, I can just see them after the sort of the match, probably sitting there sharing a beer or whatever, being like bloody pom journos, and just playing our sort of journalists.
I mean,
exactly
presumably he would have done it with an Australian accent.
Was he not Italian?
Okay. Anyway, okay. Well, so yeah, he had a playing career. That's not what we're here to talk about, of course, because coaching is where he's kind of really shone, and of course why we're also interested in him now. So I'm going to take a look at his coaching career, which began in 1994, and obviously bring us up to date. Or we'll bring it up to where he took over from England. I don't think we're going to go into too much about what he's done with England, despite being the England Rugby Pod, just because we've obviously covered it. We cover it kind of week in, week out. Every time we talk about England, there's obviously Eddie Jones chat that goes along with that. So I don't think people need to hear us chat about that specifically. So we'll get to the point where he took over from England, and then we'll maybe look at what the future holds, and look kind of ahead to what the next couple of years leading up to the World Cup has in store for us. So, yeah, as I say, 1994. He obviously, as I mentioned, he'd given up rugby, playing rugby, to follow a career as a teacher. That was in 92. And in 1994, 2 years later, he retired as a teacher. So maybe it wasn't such a big passion after all. He actually went back to Randwick, his former club, as you mentioned, where he played with all those guys, and that was his first coaching job. Obviously, that's at a relatively low level by comparison. 95, I guess, is where he kind of first started to take his steps in the kind of real professional direction. He went out to Japan, initially at Tokai University. At that time, also, he was the Japan national side's assistant coach, which I guess, that was the first opportunity he got to kind of be involved in international rugby. The Suntory, I can't even say it, Sun Goliaths, that's it.
Sun Goliaths, yeah.
Suntory Sun Goliaths, that was in 1997, is where he went there. I don't have a huge amount to say about all of these different roles, so obviously if there's anything as we're going along.
I've actually got... It's probably about, but I mean, actually finish and I'll go, because it's not necessarily, but there's an interesting article I read from Ben Darwin about sort of, which included times at Sun Goliath, but it covers more than
better
that, so.
Further on. Okay, well, yeah, jump in whenever you've got your stuff. His first kind of big role, in the sort of top flight, if you like, was when it was 1998, when he went to ACT Brumbies. So this was his first kind of big job. It was in the Super 12s. In his words, he was way out of his depth. They finished 10th, I think, and he struggled. But 2000, so 2 years later, in 2000, they were runners up. So clearly, he was starting to show signs, well, more than signs of massively improving from when he first took over. It would have been a bit of a baptism of fire, I guess. And in 2001, they actually won the Super 12 league. They were the first team outside of New Zealand to do it. And I think you've got more to say on it, but he made a number of discoveries during this sort of time in terms of some of the players that he came across.
Yeah, so it was quite interesting. I mean, I think it's relatively well known that he's credited with unearthing George Gregan, and George Smith and Stephen Larkham. The George Smith one wasn't at the Brumbies. I mean, he did end up playing for the Brumbies, but George Smith was actually when he was watching a rugby league trial somewhere and convinced him to come over to rugby union for the Brumbies. Steve Larkham and George Gregan as well, absolute legends of Aussie rugby. And actually, interestingly, they had a bit of a dig at each other before, because Steve Larkham now is obviously an assistant coach for Australia. And they had a bit of Steve Larkham had a bit of a dig at Eddie Jones, saying how comfortable life is for him, how everything's just very comfortable, because I think basically pushing the financial agenda from England Rugby. And Eddie Jones just responded with, Look, I love Stevie to bits. I wish him well as a coach. I just don't wish him well this weekend. So he was fairly sort of
Fair,
matter of fact about it.
yeah, fair enough. And also, you're right. I'm very comfortable. Thank you very much. When you're good enough and your kind of career highlights have what mine have on them, then maybe you can get a job that pays that kind of money.
Yeah, exactly. And it is a reasonable amount of money.
Yeah, yeah. So 2001 was his big step up. That was Australia A initially, and actually with Australia A, he managed to beat the British and Irish Lions. And at that time, he was taken on by the Australia. Obviously, he was involved anyway, but he took over from Rod McQueen when Rod McQueen retired as the Australian national coach. Winning the 2001 Tri Nations as it was then. So that was a fairly nice scalp for him early on. You know, his home national side, and his first year in charge, beating New Zealand and South Africa to take the Tri Nations. So that was great. And then of course 2003 was probably the next big landmark in his career, because of course that was our special year. It was the home World Cup for Australia. They went into the competition as third favourite behind England and New Zealand, but they managed to oust New Zealand in the semis, of course, coming up against the might of the mighty Whites.
They certainly did. The New Zealand semi was interesting because in the earlier on that year in what was Tri Nations, then they'd lost quite badly to New Zealand, and they'd shipped, I think in the last game, they'd shipped sort of 50 points. And there's an article where Eddie Jones had just said, I know we'll beat them in the World Cup. He says, I know now how we can beat them. I know what we need to do to beat them. Now, whether that's just chat or not, we don't know. But as it turns out, they did beat them. They beat them in the semi-finals. So
let's hope. I mean, he just didn't know how to beat England.
Yeah, exactly.
Although to be fair to him, they gave it a pretty good go, and it did come down to extra time and a last-minute drop goal from the mighty JW.
It did.
But,
And you got to give him credit, because bear in mind, and I'm not just saying this as an English fan, as a team, England were so much better than that Australian team. Man for man, England were a better team. So to get that close, they put in that was a monumental effort.
Absolutely, and especially having just, as you say, upset things by kicking New Zealand out in the previous week. So good effort. But wasn't to be, wasn't quite good enough. Thank goodness. He was actually awarded a contract at the end of that, as off the back of it, until 2007. And at that time, he was also offered a coaching job with Japan. Although I guess their theory was you've done a World Cup and you've come second. I guess in his head, 2007 next World Cup, he wanted to win a World Cup. So that was why he stuck with the Aussies. One of the reasons, I guess, he stuck with the Aussies at that point. I mean, so it was all looking pretty rosy. 2005 came around, not such a good year. There were big injury problems for the Wallabies, and actually they suffered 7 straight losses. His contract was terminated after losing finally to Wales in December of 2005. And although I think the Aussie Rugby Union they wanted to kind of have an inquiry into, as they always do, don't they? Whenever teams are performing badly, they make out that it's some sort of legal thing, and it's like a big inquiry into what's happened, what's going on.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the plan was to do all of this, and in the end, they just, whether he quit, whether or they pulled the plug on his contract against his wishes, or whatever it might have been, he was dismissed before the investigation ever started. And it's interesting because we look at him now and what he's doing for England, and how good he is, and he's just won Coach of the Year and all that kind of stuff, and you think, back then, if you'd known what you know now, can you blame the coach?
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's hard. I like the fact that he has had some downs in his coaching career, and he's had some really unsuccessful seasons. But I'd be more worried if we had a coach that hadn't had that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you need to know how to lose so that you know how not to do it, I think.
Yeah.
But he didn't take him long to kind of bounce back. I mean, that was the end of 2005, 2006. So actually, a month after he was dismissed from the Aussie job, he had a 3-year deal in place with Queensland Reds to take over as the head coach after the 2006 Super 14 season. in the interim, he actually joined up with Saracens in a consultancy role at the time, and he stuck with them to the end of the season. They, of course, at the time, struggling at the bottom of the table. So whether or not you would credit him with anything to do with what happened to them in subsequent years, I don't know, but probably
it's
not.
It's a stretch, but
I like to think the man played a key role. And as we go on to in a minute, he did end up back there for a bit, but yeah. So he took that job, and then 2007 was when he kind of took over. This was actually his worst season of his professional coaching career. He finished
the Queensland Reds.
Queensland Reds, 2007. He'd done his stint with Sarries, came back, took over the job, and he's had his worst season of his pro career. They finished bottom. They had 2 wins all season. It was Super 14, I think, at this stage. And they ended the season with a record 89-point margin defeat to the Bulls, which obviously
that is a smashing.
It's massive, isn't it? That's the margin. That's not just what they scored against the gap.
92-3, I believe.
Huh?
I believe the score was 92-3.
Jeez, yeah, you see, and I guess as you expect in situations like that, the media calls for change at the top. So they wanted him got rid of, and I guess ultimately they got their way.
So there was one part about the Queensland Red I find interesting. I mean, the coaching side I think maybe slightly more unremarkable, but at the time, for the Reds, everyone was talking about Curtly Beale. He was the new upcoming guy, and no one had heard of this fella Quade Cooper, who at the time was a 17-year-old fly half, sort of, on the school system that Eddie Jones had seen. And Eddie Jones at the time's like, ignore Curtly Beale, there's this guy Quade. And it was Eddie Jones really who brought Quade Cooper sort of, into the sort of limelight as such. And I think the thing that makes that sort of quite interesting for me, so he basically saw a schoolboy 10 and thought, this guy's going to have something special about him, which despite all Quade Cooper's sort of ups and downs, I think it's fair to say he's a fair talent.
Yeah.
And who does that remind you of? Oh. To me, it sort of smacked of a certain Marcus Smith.
Yeah.
Who sort of unknown until Eddie Jones has started saying, no, there's this kid, Marcus Smith. And let's hope Marcus Smith already seems to be doing good things.
Well, that's it. I think it's pretty safe to say that Marcus Smith will be involved in an England shirt in the future. I guess the big question is whether it will be in the next 2 years, and whether or not Eddie Jones will still be in charge when that opportunity presents itself. Because of course, depending on what happens, and if things happen, particularly I think if things happen as we believe they will, it wouldn't be a stretch to think that Eddie's going to go, well, I've won the World Cup now, time to move on, next challenge. So we might have someone else in charge, and they might have a very different view. So I think it would be a shame if he's discovered something in Marcus Smith and it doesn't get realised.
Sure.
But hopefully, I think Eddie Jones is going to. He's kind of put a bit of a marker down, hasn't he? As the England boss, he's kind of said, "Look, actually, I've done things differently, and it's working." So hopefully, it's going to introduce a kind of new breed of coaching kind of setup in the England camp. So even if he's not the guy, leading from the front anymore, the way he's done things will kind of be a. I don't know, just the way that
almost a blueprint.
Yeah, because I think if you look at the past, there's been this blueprint in place that just hasn't been the right one. Clive Wood would perhaps upset that slightly and in a positive way. But there's been an awful lot of, well, this is how it's always been done in the past, so this is how we're going to do it again. And as we've seen over the years, it doesn't always work. I hope he's just mixed things up a bit now.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Darwin, and again, I won't go into full detail just yet about it, but one of the things he said in this article, which I'll sort of talk about in a bit more depth later, is he said that Eddie Jones will have the way he wants to play rugby. And at the moment, that doesn't seem in line with what the English RFU are saying. This was back in sort of 2015, 16 when he took over. And then Ben Darwin said, Eddie Jones won't compromise. It's either going to be the English RFU's way or Eddie Jones's way, and Eddie Jones won't back down. So if it's not his way, he'll be gone fairly quickly. The fact that hasn't happened, and what has happened since, suggests to me maybe that golf wasn't quite as Ben Darwin was making out, or maybe.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know. Yeah, I kind of think that he probably came in, and maybe the fact that, you know, and as I mentioned at the end of this kind of little career section, the fact that he kind of temporarily wasn't coming to England, and then it all kind of changed at the last minute. You know, maybe that it came down to certain things like this. You know, the RFU perhaps were saying, we want you, but you're going to do things our way, and he said, I'm not coming if that's the way things are going to be. And ultimately, they backed down and said, okay, no, we need someone like this. You know, we'll let him do it his way and see what happens. We're speculating, obviously, but I think, you know, I quite like the idea that he said, hey, look, you know, I'd love to do it, but I've got another job, as you know, if I want to stick with this one. So if you want me, it's my way, or find someone else.
Yeah, I suspect there would have been some bartering there, because I mean, I don't know what Eddie Jones's thoughts were, but obviously there was big chat after the World Cup, the 2015 World Cup, about picking foreign players. Now that policy has stayed in place, and it's something the RFU are sort of fairly adamant about. So I wonder whether, because I can't see Eddie Jones sort of caring about that, about the principles of why that's in place. So I wonder if there was a part where Eddie Jones looked at the team and thought, do you know what, I don't really need any of those foreign players. So he might have been like, right, you have that, but in return, this is what I want.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that earlier when I was kind of making my notes, and I was thinking kind of the same thing. But actually, it was that perhaps he kind of did back it, because it kind of if you don't look at it, it's not about pride and loyalty to a country and all that kind of stuff. It's all to do with developing rugby in a country. And obviously, you know, England's one of the most developed rugby nations in the world, but probably the most developed rugby nation in the world. So it probably needs less of that than some of the other nations. But I think he probably backs the principle of, look, if you're going to do this, you make a commitment, and to do that, to make that commitment, and to be available to me when I need you, you need to be on hand, and your club needs to be okay with it. Because I think that's one of the issues as well, isn't it? A lot of the French clubs would just not release players.
Yeah.
So maybe Eddie was like, actually, do you know what? I'm okay with it, because I don't want to call on my players and then be told that, you know, a handful of them aren't allowed to come because they're playing in France. So yeah, I mean, and you know, he's a guy that's clearly not afraid to speak his mind. One of the incidents that actually occurred when he was with the Reds, kind of the end of 2007, he was fined 10 grand for mouthing off about the ref in a game against the Brumbies, where he wasn't happy with how things. We've seen it from other guys since. You know, coaches get fired up, but you know, he's obviously learnt a little bit, and he's a bit more cautious about what he says now. But clearly, you know, he's passionate about this game, and as we all are, and that's what we need.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously there was, but you know, you can't get in trouble for showing emotion during a test match, which happened when we played. It was during Argentina, wasn't it? When he started swearing at the camera. Well, not swearing at the camera, but he called.
What did he say? What the fuck are we doing, or something?
Yeah, exactly. So his emotions are there, but like you say, I think he's good at keeping in check, and something sort of alluded to earlier. The whole sort of relationship with the press is something that's it's been a really interesting one. I mean, the whole thing when he turned up before the Six Nations this year, and he'd cut his face.
Yeah.
Do you remember when he had the cut on his face?
Or whatever it was? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's sort of 3 different stories about how it happened,
and all of them came from him, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. And I just think in his head, he's like, you know what? I'm just going to fuck with these guys. Just like he's tripped over in the shower, slipped on some melted ice, or like a training ground incident. I quite like the fact.
But it's brilliant, isn't it? Because it's like with Owen Farrell as well. When Owen Farrell got injured, and he said that it was his dog.
Yeah.
And that was all just made up.
Yeah.
I like it. It's kind of particularly when England aren't necessarily firing on all cylinders. It deflects the media away from the players. He lets him get on with dealing with the players, and he absorbs all the media all the media pressure, and I think he loves it anyway. I don't think he sees it as pressure. I think he gets a kick out of it. But if it also means that his players can concentrate on what they have to do and not worry about what the media is saying about them, it's kind of genius, isn't it?
It is, and I think that's right, and I think it's quite a good insight into a man. Sort of these are a lot of them, some of them anecdotes and things, but it is a bit of a sort of insight into how the man operates, and I think you're spot on there. Yeah. What he's got a goal behind it. It's not just him bored. I mean, it may be sometimes him bored and being like, let's just mess with the press, but I very much doubt that. I think it's very much about like, right, let's move their crap away from them saying that whoever's not on form or was this the right pick, and let's give them something else to chat about, and then my guys can get on with going out and winning.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on. Obviously we've come to the end of the season with the Reds. It's not gone to plan. The media are calling for blood. He's a man that does tend to land on his feet, doesn't he? Because late 2007, the season's just finished. He's got an offer from Fiji to be a technical advisor for the 2007 Rugby World Cup for them. But he turns that one down and does the same thing for South Africa instead under Jake White. Never a bad guy to go and work with, is it, Jake White?
I've heard bad things about him, I must admit. But...
Oh, have you?
Well, just I've heard he's a bit of an arsehole, but obviously as a coach he's been fairly successful. Yeah.
Well, and this year in particular, wasn't it? Because... he was well, no, not obviously. I think ironically, after all the abuse he got for having a bad season with Australia, despite his previous successes, he was then criticised by the Australian Rugby Union chief exec, John O'Neill, for taking the South Africa job. Saying that what was he doing going and helping, their big rivals in a World Cup year?
Yeah.
And you kind of think, do you know what? You sacked the guy for not doing a good enough job for you. You can't now come out and bitch about the fact that he goes and works for one of your rivals.
I find it amazing when people do that. I mean, to go off topic a bit, it's like the whole Moriarty thing. Ross Moriarty with Gloucester now. He's basically been told he can't play for Wales unless he goes to play for a Welsh team. So naturally, he goes over to Wales. He wants to play international rugby, and Gloucester are like, he's let us down. We brought him through the academy and things. It's like, what, hang on a minute. You happily will get rid of anyone when you want to, but now the guy, because he wants international ambitions, and it's sort of the same happened with Eddie Jones. It's like, guys, no, you can't have it both ways. You can't suddenly, sack the guy and then complain he's gone to get another coaching job.
Yeah. And, let's be honest, he responded in the best way possible because, of course, South Africa went on to win the Rugby World Cup that year. And ultimately it was the hiring of Eddie Jones was heralded as a kind of masterstroke appointment. He massively improved their backline. That was the kind of the big thing that he brought to their game, which sounds very familiar. It's one of the things that we're seeing with England. What our backline is kind of doing and where they're going, and it kind of brings me on to that kind of discussion we had, I think, in our last episode, where we were sort of debating exactly what role, or maybe we were having it between episodes and we were just talking about it with a view to this one, but debating what role Eddie Jones actually plays, or does he have a backline coaching? Sorry, we know he's got a defence coach, we know he's got a forwards coach. Is he the backs coach? And whilst I wasn't able to find out the answer to that, it certainly looks that way, doesn't it? I mean, this is clearly where his sort of experience and successes lies, in his ability to control the back line, which is both interesting and ironic because, of course, he was a hooker.
Yeah, it is. And I know there's been chat before, articles I've read about how, his genius as a sort of attacking tactician. But it's true because we've obviously got Paul Gustard as our defence coach, Steve Borthwick as, officially brought in as the line-out coach. I think he's probably sort of line-out and scrum coach, I think, but he's basically forwards coach. And we are certainly one of the few top tier nations without an attack coach. And that, although, no one's clarified this, that seems that is Eddie Jones's role.
Yeah, which is, he's done it successfully in, for a number of other nations. Or to a degree, obviously with South Africa, he was only there as a technical advisor, and it was only for a brief stint, but nevertheless, he in a short period of time, he managed to do great things. So it seems to be working for England. It worked for them. It's worked for other nations in the past. I'm okay with it.
Did you find it weird when he was with South Africa, but they wouldn't let him wear like the South African emblems or things on his?
It was the weirdest thing. I mean, this is South Africa. This is a country that says that a certain percentage of the team has to be black.
Yeah.
Regardless of talent. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting that it should be the other way around, but surely you just pick the best team, whoever that may be.
I hate sort of race, religion, political agenda within sport. I just don't. I mean, my personal view is there's no place for it. I mean, sport. You want sport to just be pure and it just to be, sport to be sport. And that approach I found weird, but hey, I guess it's irrelevant.
It is what it is. But he just wore his tracksuit everywhere.
Yeah, he probably loved it.
It was bizarre that they wouldn't let him. He was one of the masterminds that helped them win the World Cup, and it was too much of an ask to let him wear the sort of the team. Well, I guess the team uniform, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah.
Bizarre. But anyway, such is life in bizarre nations that aren't England. So that was 2007. So the next big move was 2009. He rejoined Sarries. So I'm not sure exactly. I guess he stuck with South Africa for a bit after the World Cup, because the World Cup was 2007, wasn't it?
World Cup in 2007, yeah.
France. And so 2009 was the next. Or maybe maybe I've got this wrong. Maybe it was early 2008. That's right. He rejoined Sarries actually in early 2008 in an advisory role, but he took the director of rugby job in the 2008-2009 season. That's where I got confused. He went back to Sarries, great, but he actually left there. He quit in March of 2009, citing personal reasons, but he had a massive falling out with the board. And again, this is one where I wasn't able to get any details, so I don't know if you managed to find anything more specific, but he describes it as the worst period he's ever had in rugby.
Yeah, I looked into that. I had no idea what it was about. I couldn't find anything, because another thing that also is completely lacking in information is, I think it was 2007, maybe 2006, but he was also a sort of technical consultant for Samoa.
Yeah, there's no information.
There's no information about it. I mean, the only way I know about that is when he was interviewed after England versus Samoa, and they said to him, obviously you were a technical consultant, and he's like, yeah. But there's no Eddie Jones in this day and age with all press and everything. Eddie Jones seems to have some things that have slipped under the radar, and
secret life.
It makes the man a bit more interesting.
It does make him more interesting. We'll definitely keep our ears to the ground on that one, because I think if we can find anything out about it, it probably won't be remotely interesting at all. But at least we can say we dug up the dirt and found out what was what. If we can find anything, or if anyone out there knows anything about that, please get in touch and let us know, because it'd be interesting to know what that was all about, other than the fact that he did it. Sarries fell out with them, moved on from them. So 2012, leading into the 2012 season now. So I guess this is now we're looking 2010 to 2012. He rejoined the Sungoliaths back in Japan. Led them to victory in 2012. This was kind of the start of his this whole story that I guess built towards the 2015 Rugby World Cup with Japan, because following the victory with the Sungoliaths in 2012, he was appointed the head coach of Japan, obviously with the goal of taking them towards the 2015 World Cup. And his personal goal, he was very clear early on. He said, I want to be a top 10 team. I want to take these guys and turn them into a top 10 nation. And one of the first things that he did when he got there was he reduced the number of foreigners that were playing for them, because at the time they were all about bringing in, I guess, expats and things.
A lot of ex-Kiwis weren't there.
To represent, to be the Japanese side. And he wanted to make the Japanese people passionate about playing this sport. And wow, what a job he did.
Yeah.
I mean, let's look at how he got to that World Cup, because we all know what happened there. So as I mentioned, he reduced the number of foreigners. It was a slowish start, but he got his first European win for Japan, or two of them on the bounce against both Romania and Georgia. That was November 2012, so I guess the equivalent of their autumn internationals. So, it didn't hang around too long. He only took over at the beginning of 2012. So, 2 European wins in his first year in charge. In 2013, they got their 6th consecutive win in the Asia Five Nations. I mean, I'm guessing that's less of an accolade, given that it was the 6th consecutive one and only his first. But they then drew the series. They drew the... What was it? It was the
What was it? What have you lost here? What have you lost?
Well, apart from my way with my notes, because apparently my writing's so bad I can't even read it. Should really have learnt it, shouldn't I, rather than just writing it down and reading it out. So they got their 6th consecutive win in the Asia Five Nations.
Was it World Cup qualifying?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it was, but what I do know, it was their first series win against Wales.
Oh, okay.
That was what it was. To 2013, it was a 2-test series. They lost the first test as they were expected to, but they actually won the second test 23-8. Their first ever win against Wales. I don't remember it. I don't remember that happening. But
no, I don't remember that.
But that's awesome. Wales kept that one under wraps, didn't they?
Well, at the moment, there's a lot they've got to keep under wraps, to be honest, if they can. So they just all fall by the wayside.
I mean, he actually missed the end of that following season because he was hospitalised for 2 days following a suspected stroke. Again, no information to suggest that it wasn't that, but the fact that they call it a suspected stroke makes me question whether or not it was. But that kind of knocked him out off his feet for a few months. He missed the end of the season, but 2014 he was back. He won the Asia Five Nations again. They had a joint win in the Pacific Nations Cup with Fiji. They won the Asia Pacific Conference with wins over both USA and Canada, and they followed that up by beating Italy in June, taking them to their 10th consecutive victory, I think it was at that point, and more importantly, 9th in the world rankings. So he'd obviously
That's a hell of achievement.
Achieved that goal of hitting the top 10. And what a way to do it! 10 straight wins. I mean, it was the biggest win streak for any Tier 2 nation. And 9th in the world rankings.
It's he did a great job with Japan. It's not. I assume you're going to move on to the World Cup bit next.
Of course. This is where it all culminated. And as we all know, and if you don't, you need to go and watch the last 5 minutes. But they beat South Africa, I think, in the opening game, possibly.
Their opening game.
Their opener. Beat South Africa, and unfortunately, they lost heavily to Scotland, despite being well in it at half time. Possibly even slightly ahead. I can't remember the exact scoreline, but. And unfortunately for them, even though they lost to Scotland, but even though they then went on to beat both, I think it was the USA and Samoa, were their other two. So three wins in the group stages. They still didn't qualify into the knockouts because they had the same win-loss record as both Scotland and South Africa, and on points difference, they were third. They're the only nation to ever get 3 wins in the group stages and not go through.
That's so unlucky, isn't it?
So unlucky, and unlucky for Eddie, in charge, because what an incredible kind of turnaround. Turnaround. This is a team that not that long before was getting 100 points put on it in every World Cup against New Zealand, admittedly, but nevertheless, and here they are beating South Africa. They'd beaten Wales, they'd beaten Italy, they've since beaten Ireland. No, that's a lie.
They haven't beaten Ireland,
no. I'm trying to think who else. But they've had some pretty big scalps. And
they have, they've had some big scalps. And what I found interesting about that win about South Africa, and again, I'm reverting back to sort of an article, the article I was reading with Ben Darwin, who actually coached with Eddie Jones at Son Goliath, is Ben Darwin actually bet on Japan beating South Africa in the World Cup final. He said his thinking behind it, he knew that Eddie, and he wasn't surprised when they did beat them. He said he knew that Eddie would use everything he knew about South Africa and everything he knew about their game and would use that to beat them. And, so Ben Darwin put a bet on. He didn't say how much he put the bet on, but it was 65-1. And all he said is it enabled him to buy a few rounds.
Nice.
I suspect he probably got a reasonable return. I mean, even a fiver on, you're looking at, 300 plus quid. So,
yeah, nice.
It was, but that's.
He's masterful. He is a tactician, and it's what I find so interesting about what he does. And when we make predictions about what we think he's going to do, when we get it wrong, it's why we don't really ever kind of care when we get it wrong, because it's like, oh, he went in a totally different direction to what we wanted. I'm quite excited to see what happens. Whereas in the past these things happen, and you just you start spitting, and you're just angry, because it seems so obvious what needs to be done. And with Eddie, it just feels like clearly he knows something we don't, which of course he knows plenty that we don't. But do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. He really does, and it's something I sort of found sort of reading into him, the way he is, and the way that he sort of deals with things. Like you say, it is a tactician, and just like it never occurred to me before that people were out there thinking, yeah, I'm not surprised Japan beat South Africa, because I remember when I saw it, I just couldn't believe that was happening.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah, but there's other people like, no, I'm not surprised because I know Eddie Jones.
Well, I mean, let's hope they're all saying the same thing about 2019.
Well, but let's hope England are overwhelming favourites by then. And it was just like, yeah, we always knew England were going to win it, but don't forget we were the first to say it.
Exactly. And of course, when World Rugby get wind of what we're doing and decide to send us out there to bring you episodes live, we'll obviously be grateful. Grateful.
Slightly shocked ourselves, but yeah, great.
Yeah. So following that World Cup, and really, an incredibly successful kind of World Cup campaign in the years leading up to that, he joined the Stormers. What you're saying? No, he didn't. He came to England. No, he joined the Stormers. He was with them for 8 days before England bought him out of his contract, and they had to pay $100,000, which doesn't seem like very much. I'm guessing that was to the Stormers because he had a get out clause. So the fact that he had that clause in his contract makes me think that he always knew he was coming to England, didn't he?
He must have had it in his head, right?
It sounds to me like there were a few things to iron out, and he wasn't willing to budge, and he needed to put a bit of pressure on. That's the way. That's the story I like to believe happened. I think I like to think the RFU said, "This is how you're going to do it," and he said, "No, it's not. I'm off. I'm going to the Stormers." Signed the contract, but sneakily had this little clause in place. The RFU were like, "What the fuck?" And then he was like, "By the way, you still have one last chance. That's going to cost you an extra $100,000."
Yeah.
And things my way, and they were like, "Okay."
I wonder how much, because I mean, he must have however much, how much of a guy's got sort of, the nerves, and probably did play it. I mean, at the Stormers, I read his salary was in sterling £235,000, whereas we know with England his salary is certainly around the 500 mark.
Well,
so there must have been a part of him thinking, come on.
I mean, he's one of the highest paid coaches in world rugby now.
Is he not the highest paid?
I thought that, but because the two articles I found that referred to it just said one of, I thought I'm not gonna commit that just in case there's someone else on.
It may have re-signed a higher deal.
Yeah, I don't know who. I'm not sure who has the money to pay more. But I guess we're probably talking pretty marginal amounts. He's up there. He's there or thereabouts. If he's not the highest paid, he's going to be somewhere in the region of, and I'm sure that he's on bonuses and things as well. That'll probably take him over the top anyway.
Undoubtedly,
Given 21 from 22, I imagine there's a few bonuses in there. He obviously agreed a 4-year deal with England. He's the first ever foreign coach, and obviously he is with us until after the 2019 Rugby World Cup in Japan, the competition that we, the England Rugby Pod, believe England are going to win.
Yes.
He brought with him, of course, Steve Borthwick, who was with him at Japan and at this point had moved to Bristol, so he pulled him out of his Bristol contract. And Paul Gustard, who, as we've mentioned, he came from Saracens and is our defence coach.
And Paul Gustard, of course, famous for implementing the famous Saracens Wolfpack defensive system.
Yeah.
So,
and the rest, of course, is as they say, history. We're not going to go into the two years that he's had with England so far, but we will shortly have a little look at what we think is coming up in the next couple of years. But just before we do, a quick kind of summary of all that. So with Australia, as the head coach for Australia, played 57, won 33, 58% win percentage. With Japan, played 48, won 34, 71%. That's a hell of a result for them.
That is a hell of a result.
And obviously with England, it's currently played 23, won 22, 96%, which I think is, that has to be the best.
And then no one will be up there. Let's long may it continue, hey?
Yeah, I mean, because I'm just thinking possibly New Zealand a couple of years ago, when I think they hit 17 straight wins, had a loss, and then had like another 10 straight wins after that.
Yeah, but I mean,
but
you can take
right.
period of anybody's coaching career.
But certainly not right now, because they've had a couple of losses, haven't they? So, it's a hell of a result. And as you say, long may it continue. What a shame about Ireland. I mean, I do think it's probably done us some good, not having 100%. But you look at the stats and you just think, it was Ireland.
Yeah, so close. It's a shame. I don't feel cheated by it because Ireland actually deserved to win that match.
Yeah, they did. But we've beaten Australia 5 times on the bounce. Could we not have just squeezed out an extra win against Ireland?
Yeah, that would have been nice.
But yeah, so I mean, look, it's a pretty decorated career. Like you say, there are ups and there are downs, and they're clearly it's clearly it's both the ups and the downs that have given him the knowledge and the experience to do what he's now doing with England, and it's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. I'd love to know more about his interaction with the players. And the reason I say this, and I am actually going to move to this article I was reading now. So Ben Darwin was basically saying that he hates Eddie Jones, but also loves him. Like, he was just saying he was an absolute arsehole to him. Like, he says that without him, there's no way he'd have played for Australia. But there were many times, like, be it in team meetings, one-on-one meetings, where he just had him in floods of tears. After a specific match, Ben Darwin thought, I scored a try, I made a load of tackles, I'm doing well. And Eddie Jones would say, do you think that makes you a good player? You're 50% of a player of an international prop. You're not good enough. And he could be brutal. And he said, and Ben Darwin said there were some players who just put them by the wayside. They just couldn't handle it. It was too much. Others, he said, absolutely rose to it and, went on to have international careers, perhaps when they previously wouldn't have. And the last thing, Ben Darwin was saying, but actually he was the forwards coach at Sun Goliath. And he thought, me and Eddie now have found our form. He was harsh on me all those years to get me to the man I want to be. And then Eddie Jones went and fired him. So maybe they haven't quite found their form.
Maybe he just never liked him. Maybe it's just that simple.
It could have been that. But then why bring him along as a coach?
It's like just to mug him off.
Yeah, okay.
Come and work for me. Oh, can I please, Mr. Jones? No, off you go. I mean, you can see it in him now. Even we're having lots of successes, and he's clearly more kind of experienced with dealing with the media in the terms of the things that he says. But he's come out and said, following this autumn international series, he's come out and said, this England side is not fit enough to win the World Cup.
Yeah,
straight up. As a result, the England players are going to be subjected to what they're calling a revolutionary 2-year fitness regime, which I find really exciting because it's one of the things that we bang on about all the time. You look at 2003, they were the fittest team in the world. And once you're the fittest player in your position in the world, then it's much easier to concentrate on becoming the best player in that position. Yeah,
I can't believe that this seems to have taken so long because there were England teams 2011, 2015, where their fitness was pretty average. I remember Eddie Jones saying his first training session with England, he couldn't believe how unfit they were.
Yeah.
He said it was disgraceful how unfit they were. And when you hear under an Eddie Jones regime, they're going to have a revolutionary fitness scene. I mean, you hear this all the time. When you hear it under an Eddie Jones regime, you know, actually that is going to be the case.
Yeah, and it's going to be brutal and it's going to be awesome. And, you know, we're going to see results. And it's probably going to pave the way for other people to try and do similar things. But, you know, people can always copy. As long as people are copying you, you're always ahead of the curve. So, you know, you don't need to be worried about people trying to copy what you're doing.
That was fairly. Where did you read that?
Profound. That's all me.
Profound.
That is all me.
Yeah, of course.
That is all me. I mean, he's also, you know, because interestingly, he's also come out and said that that he's looking to close what he's calling a 20% gap between England and New Zealand.
Oh wow! Okay.
He believes there's a 20% gap between them at the moment, which is interesting because we're playing them next year. We want to be the best team in the world, and he still believes that they're 20% better than England.
I don't believe that. Do you think he genuinely believes that?
I think he probably does.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Because, especially having gone through all this stuff and heard these stories about the way he's always been, the fact that he doesn't think they're fit enough. I mean, that 20% could easily be fitness. You know, that fitness is worth at least 20%. You know,
good point.
Considerably more. So it might just be that it's different ways of saying the same thing. But
I think there's an argument to say their ball skills are perhaps still slightly above ours.
Yeah. Absolutely. But it's a different game plan, and I think this is where it's about not copying. You know, all the chat about we need to be more like New Zealand. I think Eddie Jones is very quick to say no, we don't. We need our own game plan that they need to work out how to deal with. You know, because that's what I just said. If we start trying to copy their game plan, they're always going to be ahead of us because we're always following in their footsteps. We create our own game plan and you know, trust our players, to trust our defence to deal with whatever it is that they can throw at us. It's not that easy when they're having to deal with what we're throwing at them. I quite like the way that he's going about it because you look at the rest of the world and it does seem to be very much a how can we be more like New Zealand? How can we be more like New Zealand? And yeah, I think with Eddie, it's not. It's how can we make England the one that everyone wants to be like? And that's what I think will happen. I'm quite looking forward to it. And interestingly, you know, we can't speak highly enough of Sir Clive, but he's bringing Dave Redden back. Not as in a permanent position, but I believe he's bringing him back in to kind of help sort of define the fitness regime that I mentioned. And he, of course, was the fitness coach that helped Sir Clive carry the 2003 guys through to the final and the win there.
He's a massively well-respected fitness coach, isn't he? Where is he now? Do you know where he's currently is, David?
No, I don't actually. I don't know where he's pulling him in from. But as I say, it's a temporary thing. So I guess it doesn't necessarily mean he's stopping what he's doing. He's also going to have a guy called Jimmy Radcliffe, who's a strength and conditioning kind of specialist, a professor from the University of Oregon. Who again really well renowned. He's coming in to kind of provide some help and support, and a guy called Dean Armasinger, who's a mixed martial arts specialist.
Wow!
Who he's also coming in. So these guys are all to do with fitness and strength and conditioning and just the condition of the players. So he's clearly decided he wants to put a lot into turning this team into warriors. And it's going to be really interesting to see what comes off the back of it.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. It's not, when he says that, he's got a plan. Like, I 100%, from what I've read, from what I've seen of the man, from what I've read about him, I 100% believe he knows how we need to win the World Cup. So this, to me, none of this seems to be like, oh, this is something new, let's try this.
Yeah.
There's not a doubt in my mind. He thinks, this is what this isn't about let's try this out. This is exactly what we need to make us the best, to make us win that World Cup.
Yeah. I mean, the last thing that I picked up on that I think you'll find not interesting so much as quite cool and awesome, and he has decided, or he has come out and admitted, or however you want to look at it, that he wants to work much more closely with more of the 2003 winners.
I love that.
He's talking to Martin Johnson. He's talking to Clive Woodward. Obviously, he already has Johnny Wilkinson in regularly. He already has Will Greenwood in regularly. He's obviously got Richard Hill as his what is Richard Hill's role?
Team manager, I think it's called, isn't it?
And he's basically like, look, these guys know how to win. They've done it. Clive Woodward, he's coached a winning team. They've done it before. Why would I not take advantage of that?
Yeah.
He's not looking to give them all like permanent roles, obviously, in his England setup, but he wants them involved in turning this England team into the kind of the ultimate winning team for 2019. And I really like that.
I absolutely love that. But one thing I find really interesting about that is the Jono factor, because Jono, absolute legend. But obviously, there's still players there who would have played under Martin Johnson as head coach, director of rugby, whatever his exact naming of title was. And I wonder how that would.
I quite like it. I feel like Martin Johnson, the legend that is, kind of lost a bit of his shine by taking on the coaching role.
Agreed.
I think it was a real shame, because this guy was an absolute legend in the England kit. And I hope that he's talking to him as a player, as an ex-player, as an ex-winning captain, and that's what he wants to get from him, and kind of almost come in and say, for those of you that worked under him, forget that. You know, this is Martin Johnson, the guy that captained England to a winning World Cup, and kind of utilise his experience from that perspective rather than a coaching perspective. Because to be fair, I mean, he's not gone to Martin Johnson for coaching advice, has he?
No, of course not. And I'm sure you're right. I'm sure it is the player thing.
And I suspect Martin Johnson would be more comfortable being involved as an ex-player and winning captain. And that's the thing that everyone respected him so much for, both off and on the field. So I think there's a lot of value that can be squeezed out of him. And if he's got Clive Woodward, involved as well, it'd be like getting the old band back together.
It will. But it's got to help. I mean, these guys have to have their own identity. They need to be their own team. But also, you do need to respect the sort of, not just traditions of old, but, England had never won a World Cup before. No Northern Hemisphere team had ever won a World Cup before. So it is important, but it's like, how did you guys, even things like, how did you deal with the pressure? How did you mentally get to that point to know and believe you were the best team in the world and you were going to win it? Yeah.
And it'll be the little things as well, the little things that they will remember. And often it's, we talk about the running off the pitch at half time.
Yeah.
And it annoys me when they don't do it, particularly if the opposition are doing it. I just think, it's this little psychological thing. Hey, we're fine. We're not tired.
Yeah, I agree with you, but
crawl off at the end of the match when you've won. Show everyone that you've given it absolutely 110%. But don't go kind of walking off puffing at half time. Just look.
But equally, it wouldn't surprise me if that is an Eddie Jones tactic. Like, right, pretend you're knackered at half time, give them a false sense of security, and then come out and annihilate them.
Boss it, maybe. In which case, they're walking off the pitch way too quickly.
They need to figure it out one way or the other, right?
But yeah, that is. I mean, that is the career that is Eddie Jones. It's where he's come from. It's far as we know why he's able to do what he's doing. And yeah, there are some exciting things in our not too distant future, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what happens in February, March, when the Six Nations kicks off.
Yeah, absolutely. And this Eddie Jones thing, obviously, we've given the highlights now. Guys, as and when you think, Eddie's with us for the next couple of years, there's going to be, whether it's a specifically nominated episode towards him or whether it's parts of other episodes, we're always going to have additional Eddie Jones bits. But we wanted to get this one out, so we've sort of laid down the foundations for more Eddie Jones stuff to come, because there will be a lot more stuff to come. That's sort of an Eddie Jones focus as well as sort of a team focus.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Guys, thank you so much for listening. As always, rate us, review us. You've been doing it. Please keep doing it. Those that haven't had a chance yet, it'd be great if you can get onto iTunes and do that for us. Get in touch with us on Twitter at England Rugby Pod. We're also on Facebook, and you can email us englandrugbypod@gmail.com or check out the website www.englandrugbypod.com. And we will. Well, we'll get back to you, I think, probably on Tuesday, Wednesday next week with our next episode. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be yet, but it's bound to be very exciting, bound to be very interesting. And I will leave you with the words of both Eddie Jones and Dan Wood when he has a bird back. Get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.